Well, today we are here for the final session of our Gita Unplugged Part 2, and this was the conclusion of it. If you have kind of followed through with the meaning of it, here Krishna is described as a two-handed human-like form who is decorated with a beautiful forest flower garland, which is shining with a moon locket, whose head is crowned with a beautiful peacock feather, whose two arms are bedecked with a flute and ornaments, and who's standing in a three bending form, attracting the heart of everyone. Our scripture says Krishna is Raso Vahi Saha, which means he is the embodiment of loving relationships, the one who fulfills the desires of all, the one who reciprocates as his devotees demands or ask for, the one who is the fulfiller of everyone's all wishes, and one who loves us unlimitedly. That Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, can be only approached by the process known as Bhakti Yoga. Bhagavad Gita have 18 chapters. We covered 6 chapters in the first part of this program, Gita Unplugged Part 1. And now what we are coming to a conclusion is Gita Unplugged Part 2, where we discuss chapter 7 to chapter 12. A later part of 11th chapter and the 12th chapter is the subject for today. But let me do a quick recap of what had been discussed so far. Chapter 2, Krishna tells Arjuna, you're not the body but spirit soul. But it is not an easy way to realize you're not the body but spirit soul. The process of realizing, the process of knowing that I'm not the body but spirit soul is called as yoga. Yoga is a science of connecting with the Supreme, and there are different levels or types of yoga practices which Krishna introduces through his teaching known as Bhagavad Gita. Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Ashtanga Yoga, which is also called as Hatha Yoga and Dhyana Yoga, and finally Bhakti Yoga. Lord Shri Krishna, beginning from 2nd chapter onwards itself, when he introduced the concept of yoga as a means to realize you're not the body but spirit soul, he again and again emphasizes in each and every chapter that you can only know me as who I am in totality only through the practice of Bhakti Yoga. Chapter 3, however, to help us walk through the gradations or the different paths of yoga, Lord Shri Krishna nonetheless still talks about Karma Yoga in chapter 3. In chapter 4, he speaks about transcendental knowledge. It's not exactly Jnana Yoga, but it's about knowing who Krishna is and how to understand the knowledge about Krishna. Chapter number 5, again Krishna speaks about Karma Yoga, not different than Bhakti Yoga. In other words, perform all your actions as a service unto me. And the gist and essence of it is given in the 9th chapter, Yat Karosi, Yad Asnasi, Juhosi, Dadasiyat, like that. And finally, the 6th chapter, titled as Dhyana Yoga, after describing Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, and Dhyana Yoga, there Krishna establishes even those yogis who are sitting in the posture of meditation for a long, long time can only know Krishna when we take to the process of Bhakti Yoga. Therefore, Lord Shri Krishna concludes the 6th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, once again highlighting it is only possible through bhakti. Yoginam api sarvesham mad gatinantaratmanam shraddhavan bhajate yumam same yuktatamo mataha. I can only be known by that person who, with faith, shraddha, engages in service unto me. And then from 7th chapter onward, which was the subject matter for our current series, Gita Unplugged Part 2, in chapter number 7, Lord Shri Krishna describes various concepts by which we can cultivate faith. So the very first thing Krishna says in 7th chapter, faith comes from knowledge. And knowledge comes from hearing. So from whom should we hear about Krishna? Krishna says, hear from me. Or else you can hear from those people about me, those who have heard from me. Which means a bona fide institution, a parampara. So Krishna taught Arjuna. Like this, a whole disciplic succession have come down, and there are four bona fide paramparas which are recognized in our Vedic culture. One of which is Brahma Madhva Gaudiya Parampara, to which we all are connected, under which Srila Prabhupada ji gave his commentary on Bhagavad Gita. And just by reading his commentary, understanding what Bhagavad Gita speaks about is as good as Arjuna standing on the chariot listening from Krishna. But the matter of fact is, are we like Arjuna or are we like Duryodhana? Well, the message is same, but what is the qualification of the recipient? Therefore, Krishna defines what is the qualification of a recipient, or what must be the qualification recipient. Bhakto sime sakha cheti. Arjuna, you are my devotee, you are my friend. He says, Anasuyave, you are non-envious. Therefore, I am giving you this knowledge, which means the qualification of a recipient is he should be non-envious. Only then we can accept what Krishna has to say in Bhagavad Gita. Even if the teacher is bona fide, but a student also must have qualifications. So like that, chapter 7 begins with where Krishna talks about hear from me, and then Krishna talks about his relationship with the living entities. And Krishna said there are two kinds of energies, inferior energy and superior energy. Inferior energy consists of earth, water, fire, air, ether, of which these all gross elements are formed. And subtle is mind, intelligence, and false ego. But higher to this inferior energy, there is another energy which Krishna calls as superior energy. And Krishna says, those or that is living entities. We are Prakriti, not Purusha. We are energy, we are not energetic. We are dependent, we are not independent. Energetic, the source of energy, is independent. Energy is dependent on the source of energy. Sunshine is not independent. Sun is independent. Sunshine has no value or meaning without sun. Sun is energetic. Sunshine is energy. We living entities are like those sunshine particles. We are energy. And who's the energetic? The Supreme Personality of Godhead. We are always in all situations dependent. We are not independent. So like that, Krishna describes his relationship with the living entities, and then he explains how Krishna is all pervasive, present everywhere. He says, Mata parataram nanyat kinchidasti dhananjaya. I am like a fine thread which is holding everything, everyone together, but I am not visible to the mundane eyes. Then Arjuna pondered, my dear Lord, if you are all pervasive, if you are present everywhere, why people fail to understand you? Krishna says, because everyone who is born in this creation is covered by my magic spell. If you have ever been to any magic show, you know as an adult it's just a trick of hands. But what it appears to you as if something has disappeared and something has appeared. But it is nothing but an illusion created. So therefore, Vedic sciences identify 4 universal defects in all of us. Agree, say, if you agree with me, say yes. First, imperfect senses. Yes or no? Say loudly. Tendency to make mistakes. Yes or no? Tendency to be illusioned. And tendency to cheat. Yes? So these are 4 universal defects we have inherently within us. Then how with these 4 inherent defects I can research and find the cause of my creation? Because then that research would also be defective. Therefore Krishna says, you cannot know me by your endeavors. You can only know me by hearing about me from bona fide sources. An example is given. Child cannot research and find out about his father through scientific methodology, but can easily know about his father from his mother. Vedic sciences act as mother who tells us who our father is. So Krishna tells everyone is covered by my magic spell, therefore they cannot know me. And then he talks about the 4 living entities who surrender unto him, who does not surrender to him. And then after describing about this magic spell and 4 kinds of living entities, then Krishna talks about his relationship with Devtas. So far in the 7th chapter, Krishna has said how you can know me through hearing. I am all pervasive. Because of me, everything is being sustained. Why people are not able to know me? Because of my illusory energy. And what is my relationship with you? You are the superior energy of mine, and there is an inferior energy to you which you are trying to exploit in a hope of getting some happiness from it. And then Krishna speaks at the end of the 7th chapter about his relationship with Devatas, where Krishna says, even these Devatas are none other than administrative heads of the universal affairs. Any company would have different department heads who are supposed to maintain and perform their responsibility given to them by the CEO of the company. Similarly, every devata is nothing but performing certain types of responsibility to ensure every morning sunrise happens and every evening sunset happens, to ensure the wind blows, to ensure there is a monsoon season, to ensure there is a change of season, to ensure you have food to eat by having the crops, you have the fresh water to drink. All that is maintained by the universal administrators. And these all universal administrators are dependent on me. Like that 7th chapter ends. And then 8th chapter of Bhagavad Gita begins with when Arjuna have understood about Lord Shri Krishna, his relationship with Lord and relationship of Krishna with the Devatas. 8th chapter begins with a very important question: how to attain you? Chapter 8 is titled as Attaining the Supreme. And the very important question is Prayena Kale. At the time of quitting the body, my dear Lord, how can I attain you? And Krishna begins 8th chapter by giving the most confidential knowledge or most secret knowledge about how to pass or how to face death. Yam yam vapi smaran bhavam tayate ante kalevaram. At the time of quitting the body, whatever you remember, according to that, your next destination is decided. However, antakale chamameva smaran muktva kalevaram. If while quitting the body, antakale chamameva smaran, mameva smaran, if you can remember me, then you attain me. You attain to my nature. You return back home, back to Godhead. Okay, that is about how to pass the final exam. But what about how to live our life today? Therefore, Krishna says, Tasma sarveshu kaleshu mam anusmara yudhyacha. Mayarpita mano buddhir. In other words, Krishna says in 8.7 Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna, tasmat sarveshu kaleshu. Tasmat means therefore, conclusion. At all times, mam anusmara yudhyacha. In your case, karmacha. Perform your responsibilities. Being a householder, you're cooking, you're cleaning, being an IT professional, doctor, lawyer, whatever you are, or sports person, in whatever capacity, Mam Anusmara. Krishna says you can live your life while remembering me. Because the moment you start cultivating my remembrance, then there is a guarantee that at the end of life you will remember me. What we remember at the end of life is what we have cultivated all through our life. If we have cultivated remembrance of TV, movies, songs, is what you're going to remember. So therefore Krishna says, from now onwards, begin to cultivate my remembrance. So perform your actions as an offering to me. If you cannot perform Bhakti Yoga, at least begin with Karma Yoga. Dedicate your reserves to me, so at least you'll be conscious of me. After describing about how to perform how to live through your life so you can pass the final exam, the Lord Shri Krishna talks about a very interesting subject matter. Well, Krishna is again is saying, you will come back to me, you'll come back to me. So now we have to understand what is that come back to me. And then in the 8th chapter, Krishna talks about there are two creations. One is eternal and other is dukhalayam ashashvatam. The creation that we live in is said to be dukh alayam and ashashvatam. Dukh alaya, pustalaya, him alaya, which means the house of him means snow. Pustakale, the house of books, library. Dukh alaya means the house of suffering. Is there anyone here who does not have anxiety? Or let me put it this way. How many of you experience anxiety, stress? How many of you have fear of something, maybe loss of job or, and the evidence of that? How many of you have life security, life insurance, etc., etc.? So now you realize this is called as dukhalaya. At all times we are in suffering. And ashashvatam is temporary. Nothing is permanent. Like this, Lord Shri Krishna says, A Brahma Bhuvana Loka Punar Avartun Arjuna. This whole creation from the Brahma Lok to the lowest planet, Punar Avartun Arjuna, is a place of repeated birth and death. You may not remember your past life, but next life is going to happen. Next life is as sure as death. Sunset is followed by sunrise. Isn't it cyclical? Monday is followed by Monday. Isn't it cyclical? Every year, month is followed by every year end. Isn't it cyclical? Everything is cyclical, like this. So after describing the nature of this material world, then Krishna introduces the spiritual world, talks about his spiritual world, and finally, 8th chapter ends with Lord Shri Krishna speaking about how Bhakti Yoga is the easiest and the best means to attain to this perfection which Krishna is trying to teach us through Bhagavad Gita. And what is Bhakti Yoga? It's very simple. Wherever you are in whatever situation, take to the practice of chanting the holy names of the Lord. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare. This is how we cultivate remembrance of the Lord. This is called as mantra meditation. Eat sattvic ahar. Meet with saintly people. Read wisdom books like Bhagavad Gita, Ramayana, Srimad Bhagavatam. That's it. This is Bhakti Yoga. You don't have to go to the forest. You don't have to perform different kind of gymnastics of Hatha Yoga, etc. You don't have to perform severe austerities. Just a sattvic ahar. After describing these glories of Bhakti, then the 9th chapter begins with where Krishna says, well, until now I have told you how Bhakti Yoga is the easiest. Let me tell you the glories of Bhakti Yoga. 9th chapter is dedicated to that. 9 chapters begin with Rajvidya, Rajguyam, Pavitram, Idam Uttamam, Pratyaksva Magam Dharmyam, Susukum, Kartumavayam. Krishna tells Arjuna, Rajvidya, Rajguyam. Arjuna, the knowledge that I am giving you is the king of all knowledge, is the most confidential, is the purest of all. And if you study this, you will have a direct experience of the Supreme Lord. Susukum Kartumavayam. Susukum, the moment you take to the process, you become blissful. Kartam Avayam, and it is imperishable. It is eternal knowledge. Like this, the 9th chapter of Bhagavad Gita begins, where the subject matter, the focus is to, talk about the glories of devotional service, the glories of Bhakti Yoga. Prior to that, Lord Shri Krishna, before we can get into the subject matter, he talks about his inconceivable relationship with this creation. And he says how he is part of this creation, yet he is not visible to everyone. After describing this, then he talks about how there are different kinds of people. Some say everyone is God. Some say no one is God. Some say Krishna cannot be God. Why? Because he appeared in human form. And some say God is formless. So Krishna in 9th chapter introduces different types of atheism. After talking about this, finally Krishna begins to talk about how glorious is this Bhakti Yoga, which means how easy it is. And it begins with the first verse, Patram Pushpam Phalam Toyam Yome Bhaktya Prayachati. 9.26. You don't need anything to serve the Lord. You can offer some flowers, Patram Pushpam Phalam, you can offer some fruits. If not anything, if you think all this is expensive, at least offer some water. But offer with affection. And Krishna says, I will accept it. That's it. And like this, Krishna talks about in this 9th chapter, at the end of it, and Krishna says, one who comes to my shelter, I will take care of him. I will protect him entirely. And finally, 9th chapter concludes with where Krishna gives us the de facto instruction. Manmana bhava madbhakto madayaji mam namaskar. At all times, Arjuna, remember me. Be grateful. Worship me. Like that, the 9th chapter ends. Now, question comes, Manmana, you have to engage your mind in remembering Lord. For mind to engage in remembering, then we have to know the greatness of that object on which we want to focus. If somebody in front of us is very great, for whom we have natural respect, remembrance becomes very easy. But somebody who we think is familiar to us, then is very difficult. So 10th chapter title as the opulence of the absolute. Lord Shri Krishna declares his opulences. Arjuna actually asked for it. And here there are 4 classic verses where Krishna says, Aham sarvasya pravaho matah sarvam pravartate. Iti matva bhajante mam buddhabhava samanvitaha. Aham sarvasya prabhu. I am the cause of everything. Aham means I. Krishna declares, I am the cause of everything. One who knows that I am the cause of everything, he engages in bhakti unto me. And what is their life? Machita madgata prana bodhiyanta parasparam kathiyantascha mam nityam tushyanti cha ramanti cha. Such an individual always engages and relishes in hearing and discussing about me. And how do I reciprocate to such an individual who is always absorbed in me? Krishna says, Tesham satata yuktanam bhajatam priti purvakam dadami buddhi yogam tam yena mam upiyantite. For such an individual, I protect him. I give him the intelligence by which he can come to me. Tesham evanukampartam aham ajnanajam tamaha nashyami atma bhavasti. In other words, Krishna says, by my causeless mercy, I destroy all his ignorance and I enlighten him with the torch of knowledge. Jnana Deepena Bhaswata. After speaking all this thing, how did Arjuna responded when Krishna declared himself to be the cause of all? Then Arjuna said, Param Brahma, Param Dhama, Pavitram, Paramam Bhavan, Purusham, Shashvatam Divyam, Adi Devam Ajam Vivam. My dear Lord, I accept you to be the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It's not I who's telling alone. Ahastvam Sarva Rishihi. In other words, he says, my dear Lord, even the best of the rishis, Narada, Devala, Asita, Vyasa, they all have declared you to be the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And then Arjuna expresses not a question. Until 10th chapter, Arjuna had been asking question. Now, for the first time, he changes the track. And he says, my dear Lord, I have a desire. Can you please fulfill? Krishna said, yes, Arjuna, what is your desire? My dear Lord, I would like to know about your opulences. And then in 10th chapter, Lord Shri Krishna talks about his varied opulences. This is just a recap because we have discussed all of this. And Krishna talks about all his opulences. The essence is how, if there is any greatness, if there is any valor, if there is any beauty, if there is any intelligence, the source of all of it is Krishna. That's how Krishna talks about it. And finally, Krishna concludes 10th chapter by saying, Arjuna, what's the point of it? My glories and opulences are unlimited. What I've told you is just a spark. And then begins the 11th chapter, which we discussed in our last sitting, where Arjuna then said, my dear Lord, I would like to now see your opulences. My heart is not satisfied. Can you imagine? Arjuna was standing on the chariot. Bhagavad Gita began with Arjuna on his knees with tears in his eyes, and he's saying, I do not want to fight. Look how the situation has changed. Arjuna has forgotten everything about fight. He's not even worried about leaving to the forest. Now he's saying, my dear Lord, I want to know more about you. Such as the glories of hearing about the Lord. Once we hear, then we become more attractive to hear about the Lord. Arjuna was so absorbed hearing about the Lord, he forgot only why had he come, where is he standing, what is the setup. And he's saying, my dear Lord, please speak about your glories and opulences. And Lord Shri Krishna is also in the full mood of saying Tathastu. He is also not reminding Arjuna, Arjuna, पहले मूवी देख लेते हैं, बाद में बात करेंगे, तुम पहले थोड़ा युद्ध तो लड़ लो. No, he said, all right, so be it. And then Lord Shri Krishna, 11th chapter, showed his universal form, which has never ever been shown before. Arjuna becomes petrified, terrified, and he said, my dear Lord, I wanted to have a romantic experience, and you're giving me a horror experience. Please stop this horror movie. Once again, he crashed on his knees on the ground with tears in his eyes. He said, who are you? I'm terrified seeing this ferocious form. Please, please, close this. Please come back to your two-handed form. And that's how Arjuna worshipped. Arjuna prayed to this universal form. What did Arjuna saw in this universal form which terrified Arjuna, for whom killing warriors was like a cricketer hitting a ball to a six. Like that, bloodshed was a fun for a Kshatriya. So what did Arjuna saw that could terrify him? Arjuna saw in universal form, having unlimited mouths, the whole Kaurava's army along with Duryodhana, Bhishma Pitama, Dronacharya, Kripacharya, not Kripacharya, Karna, everyone entering into the mouth of the universal form, and that universal form is crushing all the soldiers with his teeth, and the blood is falling, spreading all around the form of the all over the universal form. Arjuna is terrified. Then he saw his army side, and he's terrified with all that scene. And he says, "My dear Lord, please close this. Please kindly take the two-handed form. But before you take the two-handed form, can I request you to show me your four-handed Narayana form?" And then to fulfill the desire of Arjuna, Krishna then showed his four-handed Narayana form. Yet Arjuna was not satisfied. He said, "My dear Lord, there is nothing like your two-handed form." And this is where we started our discussion today. We sang a song, Vibhavari Shesha, and there we saw about the beautiful form of the Lord, two-handed form of the Lord, standing in a three-bending posture, whose two hands are decorated, one with a flute, and both the hands are decorated with ornaments, whose neck is bedecked with the forest flower garlands, and which is shining because of a moon locket, whose crown or whose head is beautified with a peacock feather, who's wearing a yellow colored dhoti, having an upper cloth, having a rain cloud color complexion, so charming and so beautiful in a two-handed form, holding a flute to his lips, playing a beautiful flute, charming the hearts of every living entity. Arjuna says, "My dear Lord, I want this form. I don't want to see anything else. Kindly please resume your two-handed form." And that is how the 11th chapter ends. Hare Krishna. We'll begin the session now. This was about what has happened so far, and this was the purport to the song that we sang. 12th chapter only has 20 verses. If I can finish 7th chapter to 11th chapter, which had more than 200 verses in maybe 15-20 minutes, so 20 verses I'll finish in time. You should not get terrified and petrified. Arey, abhi shuru hua hai. So I want to give a disclaimer. All right, everyone, close your eyes, put your hands, let's offer prayers, and then we'll take a quick look at chapter 12. Chapter 12, I have kind of given a title as Spiritual Qualities. For every chapter of Bhagavad Gita, to help you understand and remember what's the chapter about, we define an acronym for a chapter. The acronym for this chapter is G-O-D, God, like that. So let's take a look at these three sections quickly. G for Godhead, from verses 1 to 7. I'll give you a quick synopsis of it. You can read at your own leisure. When it comes to the subject matter of God, there are two kinds of understandings, and which you can see prevalent across different religions also. One understanding which is very much prevalent in our Vedic culture is Lord has a form. Another understanding is Lord is formless. So formless that you cannot even draw a Lord. If you do so, it is considered blasphemy. Like Sikhism, Islam, Christianity. If you go to any of their places of worship, in their places of worship, you will not see any form of the Lord to whom they worship. What you will find is the words spoken by the Lord revealed to a devotee or a messenger, whoever you want to call it. So there would be Guru Granth Sahib, there would be Quran, there would be Bible, and you go to the place of worship of Jews, you'll find book called as Torah, like this. So therefore Arjuna here clarifies this question, my dear Lord, which is superior? Well, if there are two kinds of worship, it does not mean that one does not exist. It means it exists, but which is superior? What can be the meaning of Bhagavan if he cannot do anything or something? Bhagavan means which has all the impossibilities. So if Lord can have a form, he can also be informless. That's the idea about it. So he asked, my dear Lord, we understand you have both form and formless, but which is superior? Is formless superior or the form is superior? That's how the discussion begins. And in the first few verses, Lord Shri Krishna clarifies it is the form which is the cause of the formless. So, like that, Krishna begins to speak about it, and then talks about it that how a person cannot be happy in worshipping the formless. Whom do you worship if the Lord does not have a form? And therefore, when the Lord has a form, like deities, the identification, the sense of belongingness becomes very easy. Now we have something to serve. We can serve somebody. We can prepare bhoga. We can dress the Lord. Therefore, deity worship is so important. The moment you destroy deity worship, as some of the modern day religions who are fanatic about it, the moment you destroy deity worship, your religion is no more religion but is atheistic now, because you have destroyed any means of connection with the Supreme Lord. So, like that, Lord Shri Krishna speaks in these few verses, Arjuna, the form is the highest and worship of the form is easy. Those who worship formless, they stay stuck in a word jugglery. And how they put word jugglery? I am you, you are I. When I understand you, you becomes I becomes you. Understood? Who is I? Who is you? Understood? Nothing understood. So this is formless worship. Neither the theory is understood, and when the Lord does not have form, so how do you see the Lord and understand Lord? So everything is misunderstanding. So that's the first part of discussion. I'll move forward from the details here. You can read at your leisure. These are some of the parts of the purport. Bhakti is the best. That's what Krishna talks about here. Impersonalism is painful, while bhakti is better. Easy to fix the mind. When you have a form, you can focus. How many of you are used to doing meditation prior to coming to this kind of programs? How many of you have done meditation at your home prior to coming here? Okay, and the type of meditation have you done? Have you ever practiced a meditation while looking at a point on a wall or something? How many of you have done that? If you have never had an experience of what headache means, you can try that form of meditation. You'll understand what headache is all about. There's a type of, because when you have formless, what do you meditate on? They'll tell you, well, draw a black point on a wall and meditate. And it leads to headache. So therefore Krishna says, easy to fix the mind. You have a form of the Lord, beautiful three-bending form. You can take a look at the Lord, and now you can meditate. Then engaging the senses, you have deity worship. So much can be done. Now you can engage your senses. And there is no qualification required, and Krishna protects. That's the point here. Like this subject matter goes, and then comes the next subject matter. These are all details. So then Arjuna asked, okay, my dear Lord, I understood worship of the form, worship of your personal form is greater, highest. Then how do I perform bhakti? This brings us to a very important section of the 12th chapter, from 12.8 to 12. Now, Krishna here gives options. Now, question comes, why Krishna has to provide option? Arjuna's question is, my dear Lord, how do I perform bhakti? And to answer to that, Krishna gives options. You can do this. If you cannot do this, do this. If you cannot do this, do this. If you cannot do this, do this. If you cannot do any of it, at least do this much. So question comes, why Lord gives options? To answer that, let's take a look at, first, why Lord appears in different incarnations. We just had Ayodhya temple inauguration. There are so many people in the world who are devotees of Lord Ram. Simultaneously, there are so many people who are devotees of Lord Krishna. You go to South India, you'll find people devotees of Lord Narasimha. You go to Odisha, you'll find devotees of Lord Jagannath. You go to Andhra, you'll find devotees of Lord Balaji. If you go south, Tamil Nadu, you'll find devotees of Lord Srirangam. Do you see all different forms? And different individuals are attracted to different forms of the Lord. And each form has different pastimes. So why? Because we all are unique. And all of us will get attracted to different attributes of the Lord just to attract the hearts of the living entities. Therefore, the Lord manifests himself in variegated forms. It's just to help us. That's the idea. Okay, why Lord appears in different forms? Why Lord describes different yoga systems? Many times people ask, why can't there only be one religion? Why can't there only be one scripture? Well, the answer is same. Why Lord talks about Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Ashtanga Yoga, Bhakti Yoga? Just talk about one Bhakti Yoga. Forget about it. Life will be simple. Bhagavad Gita, rather than 700 verses, will become 200 verses. Our course would have ended in the first part only. There would not have been second part or third part. Why did Lord spoke so much? Well, because just imagine when you book a train ticket, according to your capacity, you book sleeper, third AC, second AC, first AC. Everyone does according to their capacity or liking. Similarly, if you go in plane, there is a business class, and now even in the ordinary regular class, then there are seats, the aisle seat, the middle seat, the window seats. So you see why there are so many options given. Different peoples will have different choices, and to give choice is to respect their independence. Yes or no? If I don't give you a choice, if I just dictate to you surrender, it's actually an insult to your existence. And that is how the Abrahamic traditions function. No choice, just surrender. That's fear. But here Krishna manifests in variegated forms, gives you different ways to surrender. Is nothing but a way of respecting our free will. You decide what suits you and you come forward. That's the whole idea. Similarly, Lord Shri Krishna here talks about different levels in which a bhakti can be practiced. Let's take a look at it, what it means. 12.8. So here 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 8th verse talks about the highest, which is only possible for a sannyasi. And what is that highest? Krishna says, just fix your mind upon me. I'm not going to read the Sanskrit now, I'll just be quick. Just fix your mind upon me, the Supreme Personality God, and engage all your intelligence in me. Thus you will live in me always without doubt. Which means a person who can engage his mind and intelligence 24/7 in Lord. It's only possible for somebody who is completely renounced for all kind of family and social responsibilities. This is a stature of sannyasi. This is what is expected of a sannyasi. Fully in union with the Lord. All right, if you cannot do this, then what else? Do at least this much. What is the next thing? Krishna says, my dear Arjuna, O winner of wealth, if you cannot fix your mind upon me without deviation, then follow the regulative principles of Bhakti Yoga. In this way, develop desire to attain me. If you cannot really absorb your mind, what it means, let me give you an example. I had included an example here. What it means, absorption of one's mind in Krishna. Anyways, we are going to Vrindavan in the coming week. We'll discuss about all these pastimes there. This is Raghunath Das Goswami sitting at the bank of a pond and chanting in the peak sunny afternoon of Vrindavan. Now, some of you probably having some experience of heat. You know, it's nothing when you talk about May, June of Vrindavan. Very hot. It's midday, around 12 o'clock, 12 to 1. The sun is right on top of your head. A scorching heat. And Raghunath Das Goswami is sitting and chanting since morning. He's so absorbed in chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. He is not even conscious that the sun has risen up and his whole body is sweating. To protect Raghunath, a lady comes. And who is she? This is Sri Radharani. Srimati Radharani personally comes. This is happening in Vrindavan. This is just around 400 years ago past time. She personally comes, take a piece of a cloth and covers the head of Raghunath Das Goswami to give him the shade to protect Raghunath Das Goswami from heat burn or sunburn as you call it. And he has no idea what's happening. So this is one level of absorption. Well, if you cannot be so absorbed, then Krishna says, well, do this. What is this? Then follow the regulative principles of Bhakti Yoga. What is the regulative principles of Bhakti Yoga? Now is the time for at least us to introduce what are the regulative principles. which means chanting 16 rounds of Hare Krishna Mahamantra every day. It is not that you have to start with 16 rounds, you can start with 2 rounds, 4 rounds, 6 rounds. But the regular principle means at least we should spend 1.5 hours per day in cultivation of remembrance of the Lord. And it's a process, you can be guided on how to come to that level. Second, eating only Krishna Prasadam. Third, eating only Krishna Prasadam means no non-veg, no onion garlic, no intoxications. These are the regulations of if you want to really develop relationship with the Lord, you also have to raise your level, right? You cannot be here and expect to have a relationship with all pure. You have to also increase your level of purity. So that's about eating habits. Then about association, meet with saintly people. About the knowledge, read wisdom literatures. Like these are some of the principles of bhakti that one has to begin to practice. So that is this stage. But if somebody says, no, humse to itna bhi nahi hoga. Krishna says, no problem. If you cannot do this, okay, at least do this much. What Krishna says further? I do not have time nor interest in devotional practice. Then what? Well, Krishna says, no problem. If you cannot practice the regulations of Bhakti Yoga, Krishna says, then just try to work for me. Because by working for me, you will come to the perfect stage. Well, if you cannot follow the rules and regulations of Bhakti Yoga, at least work for me. Which means try to engage in some kind of spiritual work, just like building a temple and any kind of spiritual endeavors. We're going to introduce one spiritual endeavor at the end of program. We're launching one social campaign. So if not, at least become part of spiritual campaigns so that at least some amount of service is rendered. Because we may not be able to take rules and regulations, but we cannot give up our tendency to work. So Krishna says, at least work for me. All right, somebody may say, well, that's also not possible because my family members are against any of such kind of efforts. I cannot work for Krishna. Then Krishna says, no problem. If you cannot do this much also, okay, I have not included the verses here, so I'll show you here. So if you cannot do this much also, if you cannot work for Krishna, then Krishna says in the 11th verse, at least if you cannot work for me, at least dedicate some result of work for me, which means at least give some charity for Krishna conscious activities. Then Arjuna said, what if my family members do not permit me to donate anything for Krishna conscious activities? Krishna said, okay, if you cannot do even that much, at least contribute some of your hard-earned wealth for social causes, feed the poor, help the undernourished kids, provide some education, give some clothes, at least that much you can do. Somebody says, I cannot do even that much, I am very कंजूस, सब कुछ मेरे लिए, मैं किसी के लिए कुछ नहीं करूँगा. How magnanimous Lord is. Lord says, no problem. Despite you being so miser, okay, if you cannot cultivate even this much renunciation, at least pick up some book to cultivate knowledge. At least cultivate knowledge. If not now, maybe in the future lifetimes, you will understand how life has to be lived. Like this, Lord gives all options. At least somewhere we can fit in. Of course, these options are only for those living entities who have some inclination to come towards the Lord, which were discussed in the 7th chapter. After describing all these options, then we come to the last section of the 12th chapter. As I said, it's a very small chapter. Now the last 8 verses where Arjuna asked, my dear Lord, what are the qualities? So let me give you the flow of this chapter again. What is highest? Worship of the form or the formless? Krishna says, well, Bhakti Yoga is the highest. Worship of the form is the highest. Then the question came, my dear Lord, how do I engage in Bhakti Yoga? The Krishna gives gradations. Now Arjuna asks, my dear Lord, imagine if somebody is engaged in Bhakti Yoga. How do I know? Everyone is known by certain attributes. What are the qualities which will manifest in a person who is engaged in your loving service? Is that a valid question? And Arjuna asks this question and Krishna gives an answer. What are the qualities of a person engaged in bhakti? Many times people have asked me, Prabhu ji, हमने देखा है अपनी माँ को, अपनी चाची को, ताई को, बुआ को, अम्मा को, दादा को, बहुत पूजा पाठ करा, जीवन पर पूजा पाठ किया, पर कभी उनमें कोई परिवर्तन नजर नहीं आया. How many of you ever thought like this? Please raise your hand. बहुत कुछ करते हुए देखा है पर कुछ परिवर्तन नजर नहीं आया. हाथ खड़ा करिए. Well, to all of them, bring to this section of Bhagavad Gita. Krishna says, if you are actually doing vidhi purvakam, which means if you are actually doing how it has to be done, the result is going to come. So therefore their worship, what they are engaged into, Krishna says in 7th chapter, is avidhi purvakam. Avidhi means they are doing something. They even don't know what they are doing, what it means, in which scripture it is given, but they are doing something, and that something they call as the worship. But Krishna says that is not necessarily worship. If you want to please someone, you ask him, how can I please you? If you want to please the Lord, from where have you learned the process of worshipping the Lord? हमारी अम्मा ने हमें सिखाया, हमारे दादा ने सिखाया. Very nice, that's good. But who taught them? So that's the point so far. So let's take a look at what are the qualities of an individual who is engaged in bhakti. Okay. D for devotee's disposition from 13 verse to 20th verse, which means the last 8 verses of this chapter. What are the qualities of a person who is engaged in bhakti? I have divided this into 4 to 5 categories. Let's take a look at it. First, what is the attitude of such a practitioner towards oneself? How does he treat himself or herself? That's the point here. So, Krishna says, such a person will be freed from false ego. This has been discussed in the first chapter. Prakritiya kriyamanani guna karmani sarvasha ahankara vigudatma kartahamiti manyate. Ahankara vimudatma, a fool, considers himself to be a doer, while no action has been performed by him, everything has been performed by Prakriti. But it appears to us as if I am doing. Because it appears to us, because we think I am doing, therefore we become attached to the result. Because I have done something, I should get the result. How many of you here at least would not have an experience of doer or not doer, but how many of you have that experience, or how many of you have ever felt frustrated in your life when you did not accomplish the results which you wanted? Please raise your hand. Then how can you claim yourself to be the doer if you're not getting the results that you want? So Krishna says, Vimudha. A fool thinks he is performing an action, but no action is performed by him. In fact, he is acting according to the modes of material nature. How many of you ever seen a puppet show? There's a puppeteer behind the curtain, and with his finger movements, he's moving the puppets on the ground. And you sitting in the audience looks like puppets are dancing. But that puppet is tied with a fine thread to the finger of a puppeteer, and puppeteer is moving the puppets. Like that, the 3 modes of material nature makes us dance, and we foolishly think, I am doing it. If you were ever doing it, then you would have got the result. Neither you performed an action, nor you can determine the results. Yes or no? You may not have an experience of the first thing, but you have a factual experience that results are not governed by me. I have tried so many times for so many things. How many of you have had an instances in your life where you would call that I got some success in my life? I believe all of you would have some instances in your life. Yes, agreed. Where you would have said, at least I got some success. How many of you genuinely put your hand to your heart and tell me, when you got your success, you were thinking, yeah, मैंने कुछ खास करा नहीं इसके लिए. How many of you had that experience? Please raise your hand. I didn't really work so, I didn't do, but I still got it. How many of you had that? Keep your hand up for a second. Just turn around. Every one of you saying. Just turn around and see. Everyone is saying, when I got a success, I felt, अरे मैंने तो कुछ भी नहीं करा, मिल गया. And how many of you on the contrast had an experience when you actually worked, you were actually hoping the result will come, and the result did not came, and you were frustrated and you were thinking, इतनी मेहनत करी फिर भी फल नहीं मिला. कितनों के संग हुए? हाथ खड़ा करो. Hence proven. Now, despite all this, if you think Bhagavad Gita is a fiction, Bhagavad Gita is mythology, salute to your intelligence. What can I say? Okay, freedom from false ego, freedom from attachment to results. That is attitude towards oneself. Second thing, Equipoise in honor and dishonor, this is a very advanced stages, but this mentioned. Such a person doesn't get affected when somebody praises or disgraces him. What about dealings with others? How such a sadhaka or devotee deals with others? First, non-envious. Imagine living in a society where nobody envies others. You would not need United Nations. You would not need hefty military budgets. All this hefty military budgets and all the expenditure is just because we envy each other so much. And the envy had to get diluted. Why do you need to spend all this money for nothing? There won't be any need for police also. Second, friend to all. Puts nobody into any difficulty, anxiety, fearfulness, or dissatisfaction, and is never disturbed by anyone. He is free from contaminating association. This in relation to dealing with others. Krishna says, such a devotee, he is alert not to take any bad association, which means he does not associate with any envious living entity. He remains himself or puts himself in saintly association and always acts as friend towards all, dealing with others. How does he react to the events of this world? आजकल तो सनसनी खबर 24 घंटे आती हैं. हम लोग की भी रिएक्शंस होती होंगी, रिस्पॉन्सेज होती होंगी अलग अलग खबरों पे. सो लेट्स टेक अ लुक हाउ डज अ डिवोटी reacts to the सनसनी खबरें of this world. He is self-controlled. He does not become fearful if Congress wins the election, and he does not rejoices if BJP wins the election, or whatever is your choice of party, because elections are on the corner. Neither laments or desires. He is satisfied with whatever comes by Krishna's mercy. Let me give an example of Srila Prabhupada. Abhay Charan Day, 1945, Second World War at the brink of conclusion. Japan is dropping bombs at Calcutta, and the siren is blowing out. Daytime, which means you have to run to the bomb shelter. Abhay Charan Day is around 4:30 in the evening, and he's frying kachoris in his kitchen, and the sirens are blaring around. And his neighbor comes running and says, Abhay Charan, what are you doing? Don't you hear the sound? We have to run to the bomb shelters. Japanese aircrafts are dropping bomb on Calcutta. We will die. And Abhay Charan Day, only wearing a dhoti without upper cloth, hot season, and very gracefully while frying kachoris, Abhay Charan Day, if Krishna wants to kill anyone, nobody can protect him. And if Krishna wants to protect anyone, nobody can kill him. He continued frying kachori, and that fellow went to bomb shelter. And Abhay Charan Day lived to take sannyas in 1959 and became Srila A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, who in 1965 went to America and 1966 founded ISKCON, and in the next 12 years traveled around the world 13 or 14 times and opened 108 temples. Wow, this is called an attitude, isn't it? And of course, after frying kachori, he ate also. After offering to the Lord. Can you imagine? No worry, no fear. Something is happening somewhere. यहाँ बैठे बैठे लोग कांपने लगते हैं. लोगों की रात की नींद चली जाती है, भूख चली जाती है. How many of you have met people like this? There are enough crazy people around these days. I went to one school program. It was an international school, and I was called to address the teachers. There were almost close to 150 teachers. They had different branches, and this was happening in Kolhapur. This is Sanjay Ghodawat International School. Now I remember, like this. At the big assembly, after my whole lecture, whole address was done, and question answers were done, one guy was really restless. He was raising his hand again. I took his few questions, but he was still not pacified. So once the whole program ended, I was going out. He came running to me, and he says, "Swami ji, हमें आपसे एक बात पूछनी है." मैंने कहा, पूछो, क्या पूछना है? बोला, स्वामी जी आपने तो ऐसे बताया कि टेंशन लेने की जरूरत नहीं है, एंग्जाइटी लेने की जरूरत नहीं है, एंजॉय योर लाइफ, बट हाउ कैन यू से लाइक दिस? मैंने कहा, हाउ डेयर यू टेल मी हाउ कैन आई से? आई कैन से, व्हाट कैन आई से? He said, are you not fearful? I said, what should I be fearful of? He said, let me tell you how fearful I am. I said, tell me, why are you fearful? He said, my parents live in UP. I said, my parents also live. So what is there to fear about if they live in UP? Are, don't you understand? I said, you tell me, then only I'll understand. What to understand? If they're living in UP, what is there to fear? Are, Baba, UP is so clear, so near to you, Pakistan border. UP is so near to Pakistan border. Day in, day night, I'm worried if Pakistan has to launch attack. माई पुअर पेरेंट्स. मैंने कहा अबे लल्लू पंजू पागल आदमी, मेरा जूते से पीटने का मन कर रहा था उसका. मैंने कहा अबे तेरे को इतना ही भय लगा है, माँ बाप को यहाँ लिया ना, बोला खर्चा बहुत होगा. You see crazy people. I mean, यूपी में रहते हैं, पाकिस्तान बॉर्डर के कितने नजदीक है. So like that we spend our life in fear. So reactions to the events of this world, they know that everything happens by the will of the Lord. There's nothing incidental and accidental in this world, and therefore a person is free from fear. Then third, okay, reactions to the events of this world. Some more points. He is tolerant and difficulty, equipoised. He knows, he's expert how to engage everyone and how to use everything in the service of the Lord. Pure internally, externally, and sees all events, either good or bad, as the mercy of the Lord. This is how he reacts. Then, dealings with the Lord, that's the fourth point. Engage in bhakti with faith and determination. So we talked about four things: attitude to oneself, attitude towards others, reactions to the events of this world, and the fourth and the final point is how does he deal with the Lord? Firm faith and determination, mind intelligence fixed on Krishna. Like that, Krishna is describing what are the qualities of one who worship Krishna. And through this, you can understand who's actually practicing bhakti. And finally, Krishna concludes where he says, dearest of all is Yatu dharmamritam idam, everyone. Yathoktam parupasate. Loudly, please. Shraddhadana matparama. Bhaktaste tivame priyaha. Those who follow this imperishable path of devotional service and who completely engage themselves with faith, making me the supreme goal, are very, very dear to me. You know, we do our kinds of rituals, but have you ever pondered, is Lord really pleased with us? Or does what action of ours will please the Lord? Bhagavad Gita clearly mentions, Krishna says, those who follow this path of Bhakti Yoga, who engage themselves with Shraddha, and who make me as the goal of their life, are very, very dear to me. Let's conclude the 12th chapter, the second part of Bhagavad Gita. Srila Prabhupada writes, the question of who is better, one who is engaged in the path of impersonal Brahman or one who is engaged in the personal service of the Lord, was raised by Arjuna. And the Lord replied to him so explicitly, there is no doubt that devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the best of all processes of spiritual realization. In other words, in this chapter it is decided that through good association, one develops attachment for pure devotional service through good saintly association, and thereby accepts a bona fide spiritual master and from him begins to hear and chant, observe regulative principles of bhakti with faith, attachment and devotion, and thus becomes engaged in the transcendental service of the Lord. In other words, our study of Bhagavad Gita should bring us at the platform of engaging in devotional service to the Lord. And that is how Bhagavad Gita concludes with. What did Arjuna do at the end of Bhagavad Gita? He said, my dear Lord, whatever you say, I shall do it. Like this, our 12th chapter of Bhagavad Gita ends. That also concludes the Bhakti Yoga section. Bhagavad Gita is divided into three parts: Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, and Jnana Yoga. By this middle 6 chapters, we have learned the glories of Bhakti, devotional service. Now, the final 6 chapter, from chapter number 13 to chapter number 18, would be part of Jnana Yoga, where there will be certain analytical subject matters will be talked. Krishna in the beginning had talked about modes of material nature. You know, my magic spell. Now Krishna will talk about what is this magic spell. and how this magic spell affects us. Everything about our personality is influenced by this magic spell. And then I'll talk about how to come out of this magic spell. Then I'll also talk about different kinds of faith, many other subject matters will be discussed from 13th chapter, how to understand soul, super soul. All of those will be covered when we begin this series. We'll be taking a 2 weeks of break now because we are next week traveling to Vrindavan. So from 6th to 14th we are out. So which means somewhere around 20th of April. I believe 20th of April we have a festival. 21st April we have Ram Navami at Symbiosis Auditorium. So which means on the 27th or 28th of April we'll begin the final section of Bhagavad Gita from chapter 13 onwards. So with that I'll pause here. If in case anyone has quick 1 or 2 comments, I'll take it. If not, I'm going to ask you a set of questions before we conclude here.